Dr. Threxel adjusted his translator band and tightened the sterilization gloves over his digits, antennae twitching with nervous anticipation. The morning roster glowed on his terminal, but one appointment pulsed in crimson. Species, unknown. Designation, canine. Handler, human. He tapped the entry again, hoping it would resolve into a familiar code. No such luck. He rubbed the chitinous ridges along his jaw, a nervous tic he'd developed since beginning his tenure at the Galactic Unity Veterinary Center. The outpost claimed to serve all sentient-affiliated species, but the recent inclusion of humans had thrown the place into disarray. Their biology was strange, their emotional expressions indecipherable, and worst of all, they brought predators. Predators. He exhaled a calming trill. As a Varmari, his evolutionary instincts were honed for survival against carnivores. Every muscle remembered 1,000 generations of running, hiding, fleeing. Yet here he was, expected to treat one. The door to the exam chamber chimed. He braced himself and strode a bipedal female, human, average height, confident stride. She wore a patched jumpsuit and a warm grin. In her arms, she cradled a creature that, to Threxel, could only be described as a nightmare in miniature. The beast had forward-facing eyes, predatory. Its jaw was packed with carnassial teeth, predatory, and its tongue lolled out in a grotesque display of saliva and exuberance, possibly also predatory. Threxel's pupils narrowed. The creature's tail began to wag. "This is Taco," the human said cheerfully. "He's got a limp in his rear left leg. Think he twisted it while trying to jump off the supply crate." She set him down on the exam table. Taco immediately padded toward Threxel and barked. Threxel shrieked. The bark echoed through the sterile room. His limbs locked up. He activated the emergency force field with a slap of his lower hand and stumbled back until his thorax hit the wall. "Oh stars, I'm sorry," the human said, half laughing. "He's friendly. That's just his hello." She stepped in front of Taco, protectively. "It's okay, boy. He's a doctor, not a threat." Threxel's translator struggled to categorize her tone. Friendly? Amused? Patronizing? "You brought a Class 3 predator into a medical facility without containment protocol," he gasped. The human blinked. "Predator? He's a dog." "Yes, an apex-class carnivore. Observe the dentition. He eats freeze-dried turkey strips and licks peanut butter out of puzzle toys." Threxel sputtered, unable to form a coherent response. Taco barked again, then sat down, tail thumping. The force field held. "You're terrified of him?" she asked, head tilting. "I'm following proper procedures to avoid being eviscerated," Threxel snapped. Maya leaned forward, placing her hand on the edge of the force field. "Doctor, I respect your rules, but I promise you he's harmless. Spoiled even. He's scared of vacuum cleaners and doesn't like crunchy leaves." Threxel narrowed his eyes. Spoiled? As in overindulged? He didn't know what to make of that. "May I see your species veterinary records on dogs?" he asked cautiously. "Sure, but you're not going to find much. We haven't uploaded most of our Earth medical data to the Galactic Net yet. You'll just have to trust me." She smiled again. "He's a good boy." Threxel remained behind the shield. His clawed digits tapped nervously against his data pad. "I need to examine the limb." "Then drop the field," Maya said gently. "I'll keep him still. Forgive me if I don't share your casual indifference to death by mauling." Taco weighs 20 pounds. That is not comforting. Maya sighed, then unzipped a pouch on her belt. From it she produced a small plush object with a squeaker inside. "Watch this," she said, tossing the toy onto the floor. Taco leapt down and pounced on it with a happy growl, squeaking it repeatedly, tail wagging like a mechanical metronome. He flopped onto his back and rolled around with the toy between his teeth. Threxel stared. He's playing? Yes, Maya said, because he's not a wild predator. He's a domestic companion animal. Domesticated? Threxel echoed. For thousands of years. Genetically engineered through selective breeding to be affectionate, cooperative, and, honestly, a bit needy. Threxel slowly lowered the force field. Taco didn't react. He was too busy chewing the squeaky toy. Carefully, deliberately, Threxel approached the table. Maya scooped Taco up and placed him back on the padded surface. The creature looked at Threxel with what he could only describe as eager innocence. Its tongue lolled out again. Hold him steady, Threxel murmured, hands trembling. I don't need to. He likes being touched. What? Go ahead. Try petting him. Behind the ears. That's his favorite. Threxel extended a single digit. Taco leaned in and licked it. The sensation was wet, warm, and strangely pleasant. Against every fiber of his evolutionary being, Threxel scratched lightly behind Taco's ears. Taco let out a contented sigh and pressed into his hand. Threxel nearly dropped his scanner. He's expressing pleasure, he said incredulously. Yup, told you spoiled. But he's a predator. Maya shrugged. He's also a cuttlebug, a food thief, and once got his head stuck in a cereal box for 10 minutes. That sounds deeply undignified. He has no dignity. Just love. Threxel blinked, overwhelmed. The scanner chirped. Taco's leg showed signs of mild joint strain. Nothing serious. You were right, Threxel admitted. Minor sprain. He'll recover within a few days. I'll synthesize a mild anti-inflammatory. Thanks, document. Maya grinned. See? No maulings. You survived. He grunted. Barely. She laughed and held Taco close, rubbing his head. I get it, though. First time I saw a Torcavian neckworm, I screamed and dropped my food tray. Threxel stiffened. Neckworms are harmless. They look like screaming entrails. That's accurate. Maya gave him a look that was surprisingly kind. It's okay to be scared. Just don't let it stop you from learning something new. Threxel considered that as he loaded the medication into a dispenser. Taco was now snoring softly on the table, twitching in a dream. A predator that snored. Incredible. He administered the dose, and Taco didn't even flinch. Maya thanked him, scooping the dog up again. As she walked to the door, she paused. You're a good vet, you know. I've been to 3 clinics across 2 sectors. None of them gave my dog a full scan or even tried to understand him. Threxel's antennae lowered, a sign of modesty. I merely followed protocol. Protocol or not, you cared. She left, the door sliding shut behind her. Threxel stared at the empty room. Taco's scent still lingered faintly, a curious mix of fur, joy, and synthetic bacon treats. He sat down slowly, processing the experience. He'd expected terror, resistance, perhaps a narrow escape. Instead, he'd been licked, sniffed, and trusted. The chime for the next appointment rang. Threxel stood, straighter this time. His gloves hissed as he adjusted them, and his digit hovered over the door control. He wasn't sure he was ready for another dog, but part of him, the part that hadn't trembled, was curious. He pressed the button. The door opened, and the story continued. The next morning, Dr. Threxel arrived earlier than usual, his gait no longer burdened by hesitation, but still accompanied by a persistent undercurrent of caution. He reviewed the logs twice to be sure. Maya had rebooked a follow-up appointment for Taco, this time requesting physical therapy guidance for joint recovery. It seemed absurd to him that a creature designed to kill needed help learning not to jump too enthusiastically. Still, a small part of him, a part he was beginning to acknowledge, felt oddly pleased. He sterilized the examination chamber himself, adjusting the light spectrum and ambient temperature to human norms. He even prepared a small blanket for Taco to rest on, after reviewing temperature comfort preferences for Terran canines. His claws clicked nervously as he adjusted the corners. When the door opened, he was surprised to find Maya already talking, casually, as if this were a routine visit between lifelong friends. "Morning, Doc. Hope you had a light breakfast." Taco discovered chili paste last night and thought it was a good idea to rub it into his fur. Dr. Threxel blinked slowly. Chili paste, capsaicin compound. Very spicy, very pungent, very poor decision. She set Taco down, and the dog shook himself vigorously, releasing a faint cloud of residual scent molecules into the air. Threxel's olfactory glands recoiled. "I will never understand the human fondness for self-induced oral combustion," Threxel muttered. "You and me both," Maya said, sighing. "Anyway, he's been limping a little less, but I thought we should check in." Taco wagged his tail and let out a yawn so wide it revealed every sharp tooth in his head. Threxel didn't flinch this time. He didn't approach, either. He still remembered the bark. "Taco," Maya said softly, "be cool." The dog sat obediently, tongue lolling. Threxel approached, scanning the joint again, noting improved range of motion. The swelling had subsided. Everything was progressing as expected. That should have been the end of it. But then, the unexpected happened. Taco, seeing a loose, dangling scanner cable, assumed it was a toy and leapt off the table with the speed and grace of a low-orbit predator. His jaws snapped down on the cable, yanking it from Threxel's claws and bolting out of the exam room. "No, no!" Threxel shouted, already lunging toward the door. Taco was gone, paws skittering across the slick clinic floor like an engine component bouncing loose in zero-G. Maya cursed and chased after him, laughing between apologies. Threxel gave pursuit with a squeal that echoed down the hall. Unauthorized predator breach. Corridor 5. Full lockdown protocol. The response was immediate. Force fields snapped into place. Doors sealed. Staff shouted in several languages. A Yilin nurse dropped a tray of spore samples. A pair of rink-hairy twins flattened against a wall, feathers bristling. Panic spread like fire in an oxygen leak. And at the center of it all was Taco, gleefully bounding down the hallway with a stolen medical scanner in his jaws and his ears flapping with joy. Maya finally caught up, sliding to a stop and holding up both hands. "Everybody calm down. He's not attacking anyone. He thinks it's a game." Dr. Threxel arrived seconds later, breathless and exasperated. "A game. He is loose in a multi-species medical facility with exposed equipment." Taco, unbothered, paused near a nurse's station and barked twice, tail thumping. A Granexian assistant dropped her tablet and fled into a storage closet. "He's not dangerous," Maya called, "just overexcited. He has fangs and unregulated enthusiasm." Threxel snapped, clutching at the wall. Maya crouched, retrieved the same squeaky toy from her pouch, and let it dangle in front of her. "Taco, sit. Now." To Threxel's amazement, the dog halted mid-run, stared, and obediently dropped the scanner. He padded back toward her, sat down, and barked once. More of a conversational note than a threat. Maya tossed the toy, and Taco fetched it with a victorious trot, then collapsed at her feet, panting contentedly. Silence settled over the hallway. One by one, heads emerged from behind corners and under tables. A cleaner drone hovered into position and scanned for biological messes. "See?" Maya said, scratching Taco behind the ears. "Harmless. Just a little zoomy." Threxel shook his head, antennae twitching erratically. He caused a complete procedural breakdown in less than 40 seconds. "You're not wrong," she said contrite. "But you also got a glimpse of what makes dogs, well, dogs. They play. They're emotional. They don't always behave, but they mean well. He looked at Taco, whose tongue lolled to one side. There was no malice in his eyes, only uncontainable vitality. The chaos had been real, yes, but so had the joy. Back in the exam room, order re-established, Threxel ran another diagnostic. The scanner cable was intact, somehow. Taco's heart rate had spiked briefly, but returned to normal. No injuries, only happiness. He turned to Maya. You claim this behavior is typical? Typical for a young, healthy dog? Yeah, he's just happy to see people, even if they scream and dive under consoles. Threxel winced. I may have overreacted. Maya smiled. You're not the first one. Believe me, I've taken him through a dozen ports. Some people think he's a walking weapon. Others just want to cuddle him. Reactions are varied. Your species domesticated this creature over millennia? Yep. Selective breeding, partnership, shared purpose. At first it was hunting and guarding. Now it's cuddling and comfort, though he'll still bark at his own reflection. I cannot fathom forming an alliance with a creature so biologically equipped for aggression. That's because you're thinking in terms of teeth and muscle, Maya said, her voice softening. We saw something else. Loyalty, playfulness, emotional intelligence. Dogs read us. They connect. They forgive fast. They love fully. Threxel didn't reply at first. He was running too many subroutines, analyzing too many conflicting inputs. Finally, he said, it defies logic. Maybe, but it works. There was a pause between them, the kind that often preceded the first moments of mutual understanding. I will log this incident under non-malicious disruption due to species-specific behavior, Threxel said. But the station council will want a behavioral profile on Taco before he's allowed near sensitive areas again. Fair, Maya said. He's a good boy, not a trained one. Taco wagged his tail again, as if agreeing. As she prepared to leave, Maya hesitated. You're not going to file for removal, are you? Threxel glanced at the dog. I should. The incident disrupted critical operations, endangered fragile specimens, and induced 3 minor panic responses. But, he clicked his mandibles. But, it also revealed something useful. His presence, unstructured though it was, elicited engagement, even among those unfamiliar with his species. You saying Taco's a diplomatic breakthrough? I'm saying he may be an anomaly worth studying. She chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. Threxel watched them go, then sat for a moment with the scanner cable still faintly damp with dog saliva. He'd reacted with fear, then frustration, and now curiosity. The chaos Taco created was undeniable, but so too was the atmosphere he left in his wake, an inexplicable lightness, as though the air itself had been rearranged. Threxel didn't understand it. Not yet, but he wanted to. 2 weeks passed. During that time, Taco became a regular presence on Station Series 9. Officially, he remained under observation for behavioral analysis. Unofficially, he was the most popular being on the orbital platform. Scientists, techs, and even the notoriously aloof Varnari delegation had begun requesting casual interaction time with him. It started as curiosity. It bloomed into something far more perplexing. Dr. Threxel maintained his cautious distance, though he'd adjusted. His internal alert systems no longer flared at the sound of claws on tile or the sudden echo of a bark. He still avoided direct contact, but he had begun logging subtle data, changes across crew performance charts. Notably, anxiety markers among staff in adjacent labs had decreased. Communication efficiency, oddly enough, had improved in wings where Taco had been present. Several crew reported improved sleep quality after interacting with him. Threxel didn't trust this. He trusted data. Explain to me again, he asked Maya during Taco's third official checkup, Why your species tolerates chaos for the sake of comfort. Maya raised an eyebrow while checking Taco's harness. You think this is chaos? Doc, you haven't seen him after a thunderstorm. I mean the unpredictability. The refusal to adhere to ordered patterns. He's a living being, not a diagnostic readout. You're not trying to understand a system. You're getting to know a soul. Threxel folded his forelimbs tightly, resisting the urge to correct her terminology. Biological processes do not imply. Don't finish that sentence unless you want Taco to sneeze on your data slate again. The dog in question sneezed in agreement. Maya snorted. Look, she continued, it's okay not to get it right away. I didn't understand the Varnari scent languages for 2 tours, but I didn't discount them. I learned. That's what you're good at, right? He stared at her, then at Taco. The creature had sprawled out across his clinic floor, belly up, a soft, wheezing snore escaping from his twitching nose. Utterly vulnerable, blissfully unaware of the weight he carried in the minds of the terrified and the curious alike. You're suggesting I approach this subject not as a threat, but as a case study. I'm suggesting you stop waiting for him to bite you and try throwing him a toy. That thought would have ended the conversation, if not for the emergency broadcast that sounded through the station 3 minutes later. Containment breach. Lab Sector 3. Biohazard level. Intermediate. All personnel evacuate. Maya was on her feet before the second alarm finished chiming. That's near the hydroponics wing. Threxel's translator chirped a confirmation. Containment seal failure. Origin. Refrigeration malfunction. Pathogenic spores unsealed. Windborne capacity confirmed. Anyone still inside? Threxel was already accessing personnel logs. 3 crew accounted for. 1 missing. Let me guess. That's where Taco ran off to. They turned simultaneously toward the door. Empty. Open. No dog in sight. Threxel swore in his native tongue, a word that had no translation in any human dialect, but the tone was unmistakable. Maya bolted down the corridor. Come on. Against every trained instinct, Threxel followed. Not because of duty, not because of protocol, but because an image had crystallized in his mind. Taco, ears perked, tail raised, walking straight into a viral cloud with the confidence of someone who thought he was chasing a butterfly. They reached the affected sector just as the final seal dropped behind them. The lab's atmospheric filtration system was compromised, but emergency scrubbers had kicked in. Visibility was low. A faint yellow haze clung to the corners of the room. Somewhere inside, something crashed. Taco. Maya shouted. A bark answered. Muffled. Close. They pushed forward, weaving past toppled equipment and scattered crates. The air smelled faintly metallic. There! Threxel pointed toward a low shelving unit. Beneath it, crouched and trembling, was a young assistant from the Xenobotany wing. A thin protective mask dangled uselessly around his neck. Taco stood in front of him, growling softly. Not at the human, but at the hiss of a malfunctioning vent releasing sporadic bursts of contaminated air. He led me here, the assistant gasped, his voice hoarse. He barked and ran back twice. I didn't understand until... Maya didn't wait. She hoisted the man up and shoved a proper respirator over his face. Threxel, call med evac. The doctor tapped his communicator, barking instructions with a clarity that surprised even him. Initiate quarantine corridor. Biohazard transfer protocol 7A. Contaminant exposure level low but confirmed. Taco whined. He coughed. Maya knelt beside him. Hey, you okay? He wagged his tail, but the movement was slow. Fatigued. They'll need to test him, Threxel said quietly. For carrier potential. Exposure risk. I know. Neither spoke as the med team arrived. They took the assistant first. Then, gently, they loaded Taco into a steropod. He didn't resist. His eyes never left Maya's. She followed the gurney without hesitation. Threxel watched them disappear into the corridor of white light. 3 hours later, the results were in. Negative. Taco's exposure had been minimal. The spores, while capable of causing respiratory stress, had been largely neutralized by his canine immune response. The assistant would recover. The breach had been minor, the scare brief, but the consequences resounding. The incident was already circulating through internal comms. Rumors said a security animal had rescued a crew member. Others claimed he was part of a new bioresponse team. Someone had already made a meme. Taco in a hazard suit, tongue out, above the words "bite the virus, not the victim." Threxel found himself staring at it longer than he intended. By the next morning, the station council summoned him. "What is your professional opinion, Dr. Threxel?" the administrator asked. "Is the creature a liability?" Threxel considered the question carefully. "He is not without risk," he said slowly, "but he is also not without merit. That's not a standard metric." "No," Threxel agreed, "but neither is morale, or empathy, or unity. Yet we measure them all in some way. And this dog appears to influence them." The room was silent. Then the administrator gave a faint nod. "Provisional clearance remains, but ongoing supervision is required. I volunteer." The words were out before he could rethink them. Several council members looked surprised. One even smiled. Later that day, Threxel found himself outside Maya's quarters. She opened the door with a puzzled expression. "Something wrong?" "I came to see the patient." Maya stepped aside. "He's sleeping. Woke up long enough to steal my sandwich and knock over my tea. So, basically back to normal." Inside, Taco was curled up on a pile of blankets, snoring softly. When Threxel entered, his ears perked. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared. Threxel crouched slowly. "I owe you an apology," he said. Taco tilted his head. "I misjudged you. I allowed instinct to override observation." Taco yawned. "I still find your kind deeply unsettling." Taco licked his paw. "But I think I might understand now why humans keep you." For the first time, Threxel reached out and rested one clawed finger gently against Taco's flank. The dog blinked, then wagged his tail once. A silent truce. Maya leaned in the doorway, smiling. "Told you he was harmless." "Harmless, no," Threxel murmured. "But irreplaceable." It began with a delegation. Not the usual kind. Mind you, no scientists or station administrators, no Terran diplomats in crisp uniforms. This delegation wore robes of breathing silk and carried bone-carved tablets instead of data pads. The Vernari high envoys were not known for their spontaneity. In fact, they had never once voluntarily visited the medical wing of Series 9. Yet on the 14th day after Taco's breach-turned rescue, they arrived. Silent, ceremonial, with unmistakable intent. Dr. Threxel stared at them, antennae twitching with confusion as they approached his office, flanked by a translator drone. "Doctor," the drone buzzed. The envoys wished to make contact with the canine. Threxel blinked. "You mean the dog?" "Correct. They request an audience." He tried, momentarily, to envision the proper protocol for granting an audience to a dog. There was none. Protocol, like most things lately, had been left scrambling in Taco's wake. "Very well," Threxel said, signaling for the internal comm. Maya answered immediately. "Let me guess. Robes, big eyes, smell like incense and moon bark. You've met them?" "Only once. They stared at me for 5 minutes straight and then offered me a ball of fermented pollen. I didn't know if I was supposed to eat it or praise it. They wished to see Taco." There was a pause. "Okay, sure, but I'm not making him wear shoes again." 10 minutes later, the dog in question strolled into the clinic, tail up, tongue out, no concept of the diplomatic tightrope he was about to trot across. Maya followed at a more cautious pace, armed with a chew toy, a water flask, and an expression that said, "Why not? Let's meet the robed space owls." The Vernari encircled Taco with a reverence that bordered on religious. They made no sound, only low, resonant hums as they extended their palms toward him, fingers twitching in specific patterns. Taco sniffed each hand solemnly, then sat, tongue flopping to the side in what could only be interpreted as calm compliance. Then he did something none of them expected. He leaned forward and licked the foremost envoy directly on the mask. Gasps filled the room. Threxel stepped forward instinctively, arms raised to intercept a diplomatic catastrophe. But the Vernari envoy laughed. A low, melodic tone emerged, translated instantly through the drone. "He accepts our scent. We are chosen." Threxel was too stunned to speak. Later, when the envoys departed, leaving behind a ceremonial offering of polished stones and an official request for interspecies comfort sessions, Maya collapsed into the nearest chair, laughing. I don't know whether to be proud or terrified. Threxel paced behind the exam table, recalibrating his worldview again. They have never acknowledged any terrestrial species as sentient adjacent. "Well," she said, nudging Taco with her foot, "you try ignoring this face." In the days that followed, things escalated. Taco's schedule filled faster than any physician on the station. He attended therapy sessions with trauma victims, helped ease patients with severe sensory processing disorders, and even calmed a juvenile zinthropodaling during its first molting cycle. A feat no one, not even its own parents, had achieved without sedation. Dr. Threxel documented everything. He developed new metrics, ran emotional response algorithms, even built a small behavioral prediction model based on canine body language. But it wasn't just the patients who changed. Threxel did too. He no longer jumped at Taco's bark. He began using the dog's presence to ease anxious interns, positioning checkups to align with the animal's afternoon nap. He noticed he was spending less time alone in his lab and more time observing Taco's interactions, talking with Maya, even joking on occasion. He laughed once. It startled him. One evening, Threxel stayed late to input the final variables into his growing study. The psycho-emotional influence of Terran canines on multi-species environments. It was becoming more than a paper. It was becoming proof of something vast and previously unquantifiable. When he finally stood to stretch his limbs, Taco patted him quietly, settling beside him with a soft huff. Threxel looked down. "You do not belong in a medical file." Taco rolled onto his back in agreement. "I once feared you," he continued, his voice softer. "Everything about you defied logic, stability, order. But you are not a threat. You are an anomaly, a beneficial one." Taco yawned, unconcerned with labels. Threxel smiled faintly. Outside, the stars turned. The final test came sooner than expected. A distress call arrived from a mining vessel docked temporarily for supplies. A crew member, a young Eltari technician, was trapped in a decontamination chamber following a malfunction. The air scrubbers had failed. The crew couldn't communicate through the sealed bulkhead due to static interference from a mineral sample she'd been analyzing. Her vitals were spiking. She was panicking. Attempts to talk her down failed. "She can't hear us," the commander barked. "We're losing her." The idea came from Maya, unfiltered and instinctive. "Send in Taco." There was silence. Dr. Threxel stared at her. "That is not a solution." She recognizes his scent. She gave him treats 2 days ago in the wreck bay. If anything can cut through her fear, it's something familiar. It's not medically sound. It's human. They prepared a pressure-safe chamber and fit Taco with a light oxygen harness. The hatch opened. He looked at them, as if waiting for permission. Maya nodded. Go get her, buddy. He vanished into the haze. The footage was silent. They watched through the glass as the technician trembled against the wall, her eyes unfocused, her limbs spasming. Then Taco appeared, steady, calm, tail swaying like a metronome. He didn't bark. He didn't rush. He sat, waited. She saw him. Then she moved, crawled to him, clutched his fur like a lifeline. They emerged together. Applause erupted. Cheers. Tears. The tech wouldn't let go of Taco for 15 minutes. Neither did anyone stop her. The next morning, Threxel received a message from Station Command. Authorization. Full service integration. Canine class emotional companion. Series 9. Operator. Maya Reyes. Supervisor. Dr. Threxelvar. Subject designation. Taco. Status. Essential personnel. He stared at the screen, emotion thick in his throat. That afternoon, as Taco dozed beside a potted plant and Maya played a card game with a homesick Martian biologist, Threxel sat quietly nearby, tablet in hand. He added one final entry to his study. Conclusion. The Terran canine, specifically subject Taco, exhibits a consistent, measurable capacity to mitigate fear, improve emotional stability, and encourage interspecies trust. While originally regarded as a predatory anomaly, further observation reveals a far more nuanced role, that of an emotional constant in an unpredictable environment. Not weapon, not liability. Anchor. He looked up from the tablet. Taco opened one eye, then closed it again with a sleepy sigh. For the first time in his long career, Dr. Threxel had no more questions. Only quiet, grateful understanding.